hundreds of once pink, frilly bedrooms comes the young feminist revolution, and it's not pretty, but it doesn't want to be. So there. And that's not nice. This is something that faced the riot girls almost from day one. And do we see this happening again right now? Can we think of a protest that has been in recent weeks dismissed as a playhouse, as a bunch of young people who don't really know what they want and are just bratty? Perhaps we might think of the Occupy Wall Street protests going on in multiple cities around the country right now. I see a lot of parallels between Riot Grrrl and Occupy Wall Street. Number one, it's propelled by a utopian force. There aren't specific demands. Everybody's very upset with Occupy Wall Street for not having specific demands. You know, Riot Grrrl wanted revolution girl style now. Okay, well, what does that mean? Not really a specific demand, but if it had gotten any more specific, you said, we're Bikini Kill, and we want sexual harassment policies that are well enforced in public school systems all around the country now. Is that a song? No, that's a policy paper. Sometimes you need the song. You know, Occupy Wall Street is a song. It keeps it open, it activates the imagination. You're making dissatisfaction visible without immediately narrowing it down to exactly which brands of dissatisfaction you're making room for. You build a symbol and you let people gather around that symbol, define it for themselves, figure out what really matters to people. You see the word revolution used in both places. The word revolution sort of floats around Occupy Wall Street sometimes without ever really coming to rest anywhere, but it's in there. So you have this sloppiness that is also quite utopian. Another similarity is that, you know, Occupy Wall Street spread through social media, obviously, Twitter, Facebook. Riot Grrrl spread through social media before there was online social media. I mean, how badass is that? We didn't have Facebook, there were zines. And then we had, like, people would make newsletters listing all the zines, or catalogs listing all the zines. Like, that was harder work. We made it happen. So through zines and through letters and through passing pen pals person to person, oh, you should write to this person, they're working on stuff similar to you, we enacted social media before the internet. Also similar, unfolding in real time, not purely staying on social media. It's like, oh yes, there are lots of feminist Tumblrs. Well, where do those go? Do people ever get in a room with their feminist Tumblrs all together and like talk about creating something? Bodies in space matter. Occupy Wall Street understands this, and Riot Grrrl understood this. And you know, so if you're, whether it's a punk club, a weekly meeting, or a public park downtown in New York or downtown in Washington, D.C., or all the other cities where there are occupations happening right now, bodies in space matter. But another interesting thing is the recognition of the power of the individual story. There's been a lot that we've heard lately about how to get people to care about a cause, you focus on the one face. You don't say there's 650,000 people without adequate nutrition. You say, look at this one starving child. One person did a study. Well, where's the tipping point? Where between 1 and 650,000 do people start caring less? The answer is people start caring less when it goes from 1 to 2. You show them one child, you say, how much money do you want to give to feed this child? They give a certain amount of money. How much money do you want to give to feed these 2 children? They give less money. So the power of the one face is important. People understood this in Riot Grrrl, not that we were putting forward our stories as a way to tug at the heartstrings of some other person who was going to help us, but because we understood that it's powerful to speak from your own experience. So there was a zine that Olympia Riot Grrrl made. The title was, What is Riot Grrrl Anyway? And in the zine, there was no direct answer. There were just a bunch of pages this size by individual people writing about what Riot Grrrl meant to them. And that's what Riot Grrrl was. It was the agglomeration of the community of individuals. So we see this also happening in the Occupy Wall Street affiliated Tumblr, I Am the 99%, where people photograph themselves holding a piece of paper with their story. This one is long and incredibly depressing. Cancer survivor, need medical care. Can't afford health insurance, moved to Mexico to get medical care. No car, no phone, mom is in the hospital, and I wonder if I can afford to come home. I'm the 99%. And here's another, people thank me for my service in the Air Force. How about they thank me with a job? This is dark, you can't see the woman's face, but on the computer screen you can see the face. And this tactic can even work for very young girls. I'm 2 years old, and Kaiser cut my health insurance. I am the 99%. This is an important realization. Another similarity that I see is the portability. telling other places to go for it and make it their own. People come and occupy a place in New York, and they say, hey, everybody else, occupy your city, and people do it. It's the same thing with Riot Girl. 2 chapters started, and then Kathleen Hanna of Bikini Kill told a newspaper that there were a dozen chapters around the country. This was not true, but she knew that if she said it, people would start their own chapters feeling like there was already a thing. She was right, it happened. You know, as years went on, more and more people just took the ball and ran with it because they knew it was what they wanted, and because it was this wide open rubric that people could take and make their own. But obviously it's not all the same. You know, the names are a little different. They're sort of the same. They're both imperatives. Riot, girl! Occupy Wall Street. You know, we've got riot and occupy, which are both like vaguely militaristic or anarchic thoughts that also have to do with being in a particular place at a particular time with other people. But then it gets interesting after that because what happens after the verb? Riot goes to girl. Who's supposed to riot? Who are we talking to? You, girl. I want you, girl, to riot. Riot, girl. The focus is on personal transformation. And it's creating a new position to occupy. The girl, that word did not exist before riot girl existed. So in the call to occupy the position, you're creating the position. It's super transformative, and that's how you know that the focus of the riot is on the girl, is on what's going to happen to you. You're going to come of age politically, you're going to come to a new understanding about your lives, about politics, and then you're going to move on to that and, you know, do all kinds of other stuff. So Occupy Wall Street directs the attention outward to the object, not the subject. The focus isn't on personal transformation, the point is who you're opposing. This is particularly visible in the statement that they released. They released a statement of purpose, and it was all about they. It was all about what these people over there are doing, nothing about who we are. It's just, you know, they have consistently sought to strip employees of the right to negotiate. They have held students hostage. They have consistently outsourced labor. They have influenced the courts. Wall Street is a very strategic target. Wall Street does not have very many friends in the U.S. on the right or the left. Pretty much only people who work on Wall Street like Wall Street. But this statement leaves me a little cold. When I first read it, I thought, oh my God, this thing is a bunch of grandstanding anarchists. There's no subject also in the call to arms, so who's supposed to occupy Wall Street? Who are you? If you don't say who the subject is, we all know it reverts to the false implied universal, right? If you're not saying who it is, then, well, of course, it's just universal, meaning it's like the white guys with the power, maybe on the left, but still, if there's no specificity, then there's some invisibility going on. I'm concerned about that. So I wanted to talk to you really fast about an incident that happened when this document was being discussed at Occupy Wall Street. There was a blog post that made the rounds that maybe some of you have seen about how a small group of South Asian activists who knew each other all happened to find each other at the meeting where this document was being discussed. And there was a line in the preamble of the document that ran like this. As one people, there's that universal again, as one people formerly divided by the color of our skin, gender, sexual orientation, religion or lack thereof, political party, and cultural background, we acknowledge the reality that there is only one race, the human race. Boy. So the blog post written by these South Asian women who were, actually I think it was not all women, but many of them were, who were at the meeting, wrote, the first major concern among us was that the phrase formerly divided by the color of our skin, etc., was unrealistic, erasing histories of oppression that marginalized communities have suffered. And the second concern was that the human race language also felt very out of touch. Now eventually, this line got changed. It got changed that night, and it got changed to, as one people united. No mention of, and we're not separated by those pesky other things anymore. As one people united, that's fine, we can aspire to that, especially in a political realm. But it might not have ever gotten there if it hadn't been that there was a group of people of color who knew each other already, were at the meeting as a group, able to caucus, to legitimize their concerns, to encourage each other to speak up, and then to amplify their voices. And I'm just going to quote from the blog again for a second. Immediately after this, I turned around and joined my friends Tanu and Sunny, who were there with Marnissa and Natasha. They had all just come back from the first local meeting for South Asians for Justice. Without knowing, we had spontaneously formed a block of South Asians present at the General Assembly. We debated among ourselves whether to speak up about this. I felt that our thoughts needed to be shared with the General Assembly, and not just to a few over email. I was urged by our impromptu block to be the one to speak up, so I did. Ideally, I would think that in our political lives, we don't spend the whole time in constituency-specific groups, be they girls or women or South Asians or queers or anything else, because we can accomplish much more together than we can in those subgroupings. We are the 99% is much stronger than we are the 51%, or we are the 22%, or we are the 7%. But at the same time, without spending some time in those subgroupings, important, specific aspects of the conversation risk being drowned out by the false universal. So, although I often like to emphasize how Riot Grrrl's organizing style, use of social media, and recognition of the importance of bodies and spaces have value across lines of gender, and they do. At the same time, the specificity isn't incidental. I saw a documentary recently on women in punk of the contemporary era, and they were all asked whether they were feminists. And they all said, well, I'm a feminist, but I'm an equality feminist. Have you guys heard this thing? I'm a feminist, but I'm an equality feminist. I'm not one of those feminists who believes that women are better. And I was like, whoa, in the context of punk feminism, I can only assume you're talking about Riot Grrrl as having been, because it was girls getting together, saying that girls were better. Because that wasn't really part of the rhetoric. It was just assumed by men that if you're getting together, you must be putting us down, and so then that led to the backlash against it. But I thought it was interesting because here are these contemporary punk musician women who, throughout the movie, have been reporting remarkably few experiences of getting given a hard time in punk scenes for being female musicians. It's really striking how they don't really have stories of people saying, oh, you're carrying your amp for your boyfriend, or, whoa, you're in a band? That's crazy. I didn't know girls were in bands. And the fact that it's become normalized over the past 20 years is because of Riot Grrrl, because of this specific space to step out from the totalizing community and talk about a specific identity thing and specific concerns. It's amazing that these women in the movie want to have equality without ever having to call attention to gender or have anybody else in the past ever having called attention to gender. But this brings me to the legacy question, because I've already started talking a little bit about what Riot Grrrl has changed. And people are always asking me about Riot Grrrl's legacy. I just said one thing. It has really become more normal for women to play music, thanks in large part to girls' rock camps, which grew themselves out of Riot Grrrl. And there are girls' rock camps all over the country and all over, well, not all over the world, but all over the US and parts of Europe, I believe. But in general, it's very hard for me to pin down legacy the way I think that people want me to do. Some days I feel just like Riot Grrrl's most obvious legacy is simply in the lives of the people who've been touched by it at any point in time. It's like, my life was changed. Isn't that enough? But then I realize it's not just about our lives, the lives of the people who are specifically involved. It's the way our lives ripple out, the way we first get transformed, and then out of that transformation connect with other people. So I saw an interview online from a young woman named Jessica, who is one of the organizers of the Slut Walk in Chicago, talking about how her activism now stems directly from being a Riot Grrrl in the 90s. Or there's this picture that goes with that one. And then Amy Klein, who's in the band Titus Andronicus, not to toot my own horn, but she read my book and then she thought, oh, I want to do something like that. And in an interview she said that my book took Riot Grrrl off its pedestals to say, okay, this was not about celebrities or even about a few famous girl bands. This was about teenage girls coming together and communicating and trying to figure out what it meant to be a teenage girl. And so Amy said, I wanted to start a girl-positive network that would encourage its members to do feminist art and activism. I realized that anyone could do something like that. You didn't have to be Kathleen Hanna. So she started this group called Permanent Wave, and there are Permanent Wave chapters starting in other cities now because they put something on their blog like, here's how you start one of your own, go do it. It's the same thing, the portability and the kind of vagueness. There's no real strong political program of Permanent Wave, which gives it space for, which makes it a space for people who come in to use it to amplify their own efforts. But the major legacy of Riot Grrrl is really in music and in media, because Riot Grrrl was largely a movement of music and print media. That's what we did best. And that can count for a lot. it counts even more now than it does then. If Riot Grrrl had had Twitter and Facebook back in 1992, I bet we would have occupied something within 6 months. Occupy Wall Street itself arose out of an idea that some people at a magazine, Adbusters, had, and then the idea spread, and people knew when to take it into real time. So, people often want to point out specific musicians who couldn't have happened if not for Riot Grrrl, and there are definitely a lot of musicians who cite Riot Grrrl as an influence. There's British rocker Kate Nash, indie darlings Best Coast, spook folkers Mountain Man, Jersey shredders Screaming Females, femme fatale St. Vincent, and let's not forget all the girls rock campers. What I like most about this litany is that none of these musicians necessarily sound like any bands from the 90s. They're making contemporary music based on their own experiences, rather than trying to relive something from another era. They're taking what they need from history and then running with it. I also see a lot of Riot Grrrl influence in contemporary feminist media, and there's a lot of it. When Riot Grrrl started, there was just Ms. Magazine and Off Our Backs, which I don't think very many people read, and nothing else. And now there's this great range of media outlets, ranging from the underground to the widely disseminated. There's Tavi's magazine, Rookie. I was going to show you the websites of these things, but there's no internet here, so I will say them to you, and you can picture them if you know what they look like. There's Tavi Gevinson's magazine, Rookie, which is completely based off of Riot Grrrl publications. And she cops to the influence of Kathleen Hanna and Riot Grrrl on her aesthetic. She's an amazing fashion blogger turned girl media magnate, and I'm really impressed with her. Women's websites like Jezebel, Hairpin, Double X, part of Slate. And then there are also zines. There's this zine, the International Girl Gang Underground, which you can find online and order, and that came out last year. And it's kind of about the legacy of Riot Grrrl and of underground DIY feminism today as well. This is a zine called Shotgun Seamstress, which is made by a musician named Osa, and this zine is my visual for a project that doesn't have its own visual yet, which is called the POC Zine Project, which is a project that is archiving zines by people of color. It's planning to curate a traveling people of color zine exhibition, establish an archive, and produce a website that shares POC zines and provide grants, tools, and events for zinesters. So that's POC Zine Project, and they have a website and a Facebook page. So all of this stuff really grows out of Riot Grrrl's attachment to making our own media. Because even though the first article about Riot Grrrl, which was on the cover of LA Weekly in '91, was pretty good. '92, sorry. What came after was not so good. There was the USA Today article that you already saw that was so obnoxious. There was an article in Spin that mostly talked about how people dressed. There's the Washington Post. From the youngest, toughest daughters of feminism, self-respect you can, it cuts off, but it says you can rock to. Self-respect you can rock to. And the women, yeah. Really great size. And then this is a quote from the 17 magazine article. They defy the concept that women should do everything they can to look as physically attractive as possible. A lot of these girls are really cute, and people are always saying that to them, but it's almost not a compliment, explains Candace Pedersen, who co-ran K-Records in Olympia, Washington. It's like, so I'm cute, that's not what I think about. I'm actually a really smart person. Not bad, right? The 17 writer has to come in and editorialize. That's why a lot of Riot girls don't shave and deliberately give each other bad haircuts. It's like, what can you say to a readership of a teen girl magazine to ensure that they will never pursue any interest they might have had in it? Say that they don't look good, because the whole rest of the magazine is about how if you don't look good, your life is over. Thanks, 17. So there was a media blackout. All of this stuff pissed people off, and we're like, okay, we're not giving any more interviews. This is ridiculous. Nobody actually ends up portraying us the way we want to be portrayed. So let's stop giving them any grist for their mill of lies. So the blackout might be a misnomer because we're still making... Oh, shoot, how did that happen? Sorry, guys. I hit the wrong key. Slideshow from current slide. The blackout's a misnomer because we were still making our own zines. This is the DC zine. This is the Riot Grrrl New York. Eureka Arcata in the far northern reaches of the state of California, number 7. Leeds and Bradford in the UK, to making all of our zines. Oh, we're talking back to the media in the zines. This is from a zine from an incredibly wonderful woman named Mary. And people who read any girls' magazines in the 80s and 90s will remember this ad, Get the Look That Boys Notice, how to lose weight fast and look, and here Mary takes over, like an anorexic with the body of a fucking 12-year-old, then you'll be the kind of girl every boy wants to fuck real hard. Order now. Love that. Also made flyers. This was a flyer that Riot Girl Omaha, Nebraska posted up around the downtown area that people would hang out. Watch out, because next time you yell, hey babe, you might be left wondering what hit you. A public service announcement from Riot Girl Omaha. Bikini Kill knew that they couldn't count on the clubs to have good enough sound systems for their words to come across, so they made lyric sheets and they passed them out at shows so that they would make sure that their message was getting across. And then girls also started their own, this is way too small to read, but it's pretty cool, it's bigger in the book. Two girls started a Riot Girl Press, which is a distribution service for girls' zines. So if you made a zine, you would send one copy to them, and then they made a catalog, and they sent it out, and you could read the catalog and order 12 zines all at once, and May and Erica would Xerox them for you and send them out to you. They also took control of media representation by, at a certain point, saying, maybe we can selectively cooperate with journalists who we really know that we're going to get a good shake from. So this is from the British pop culture magazine ID. A writer came to a meeting. She said, I want to write about you. And they said, all right, but we get total final control. You fax us the final text, and we fax you back all of our changes, and you make all the changes we asked for. And from what I can tell from the historical record, that's what happened. Because I saw the copy that she had faxed to the girls, and it's different from what wound up in there. So I didn't see what they had faxed back to her, but fully half of the text on this page is block quotes. Every other paragraph is just block quotes, uninterrupted, minimally mediated from the girls themselves. They also conducted their own photo shoot, part of which you can see in the middle on the left, and that's part of a larger photo of her standing naked with other girls around her and on her body, and says every girl is a Riot Girl. Riot Girls also held their own conventions. Again, let's do an end run around all of this media BS. Get in the same room with each other and talk about what's going on. So, real fast, here comes my conclusion, and then we can all get a breath of fresh air. And also, I'll be here to sign books, or maybe I'll even do it in the hall if it's any cooler out there. I see a nod. That's nice. So as I said earlier, us Riot Girls constantly talked about the revolution. It's a flourish of rhetoric that spoke to the fact that we were eager to think big, to think about remaking our world wholesale. It's my belief that when we denigrate or marginalize as young or immature, these forms of fervor, faith, idealism, whether in the experiences of young people or if we're older in our memories of that time of our own lives, or maybe if we're still quite young, then in the form of internalizing adult criticism of it. If we do all that, then I think we're condemning ourselves to a narrow, unimaginative politics. And I feel excited to see that there are cracks in that emerging in the public sphere in the form of Occupy Wall Street, which I hope there's going to be a greater feminist presence in as time goes on. Because there's still a lot more to fight on the feminist front. Gender norms are getting more stringent, not less. The list of things girls and women are expected to do in order to look acceptable just keeps escalating and escalating. And girls and women face increasing pressure to be flawless and well-rounded, as well as being pretty and non-intimidating. Women make less money than men in nearly every profession, which is partly, although not entirely, because women ask for less money, and we ask for less money largely because women who do ask for more are viewed more negatively. There's really no way to win. And the rules for boys and men haven't gotten any more lax either. We're all diminished by the rigid expectations that are imposed on us because of gender. The cultural expressions of Riot Girl still feel exciting to us now, because the moment a woman starts making rock music, she's breaking a rule about femininity, right? Playing rock music is tough, and women aren't supposed to be that kind of tough. We are supposed to be kind of Dolly Parton, Grace Under Pressure tough, or Not Without My Daughters tough, but not like drum soloing or singing in a demonic voice kind of tough. I also think that Riot Girl speaks to a certain loneliness in our era. A lot of people tell me, oh, I read your book, I really wish I had been a teenager in the 90s. I feel like I really missed out. People say that they don't feel like they have a community or a scene to support their creative explorations. They feel isolated. We're allegedly more connected than ever, but those networks, however broad, are often shallow. And the technology that keeps us connected doesn't automatically help us maintain relationships marked by intimacy and accountability. The message of the book, which I try to hammer again and again, is that if the 90s were a special time at all, it's only because people, not so different from any of us, were just doing stuff. We're actively taking responsibility for creating the kind of culture and communities we needed. If what we wanted didn't exist, whether that be a venue for shows, or a Riot Girl chapter, or a listing service for feminist zines, we created it. If we didn't know how to do something, we taught ourselves, or we found other people to teach us, or we just did it without knowing at all, and figured that we'd pick something up along the way. This wasn't because we were superhuman beings. It was because we saw other people doing it, either in our own communities or elsewhere, or even another period of time, and that told us it could be done, and we did it. So that's what I'm hoping for this book to do, to just give you a sense that it's possible to make whatever you need, so then you have no more excuses, you just go make it. I think that one of the most important things about the period that I grew up in is that we were all really grandiose about what we were doing. If we started to form a band, we hyped it even before the first practice as the greatest band this town had ever seen. If you wrote to a pen pal who had a zine, you told her how incredibly important her work was. We idolized our friends, we romanticized our friendships and our social circles. I think these encouraging and permission-giving behaviors are really important. I think it's very easy for young women, and women of any age, to downplay our abilities and the significance and potential greatness of our work. I see it happen all the time. We don't give ourselves enough credit to think big and act big. And I think this happens in part because we're constantly being told the ways that we're not good enough, and in part because ambition and grandiosity are not highly valued traits in women, and in part because we're socialized both to need the approval of our peers and to withhold that approval, which is a terrible double bind. There's so much in our culture that promotes women and girls being in competition with each other, and the internet snark culture privileges the withering one-line dismissive put-down over creative conversations and genuine critical dialogue. What are we going to do about this? It's up to all of you to decide. I don't want anyone to create a Riot Girl revival exactly, although it may be too late for me to even say this because my Google alerts has started to come up every couple of days with a blog of somebody talking about the Riot Girl revival. And on the one hand, I'm kind of psyched about that, but on the other hand, I really want people to be thinking about right now and moving forward, and really just like take what you need from the past and then run away from it. We weren't reviving anything when we were making Riot Girl. We were inspired by a lot of histories, including the history of second wave feminism in the 60s and 70s, the Black Power movement, and other associated liberation movements, early gay liberation, ACT UP. But we weren't trying to bring any of that back. We were, I wish I had been around during ACT UP. I'm going to create a new ACT UP. The AIDS crisis wasn't over, but we were going to do something that was arising organically out of our own time, instead of thinking that we should reenact something that had already happened. We were able to take the history as encouraging evidence that it was possible to create what we needed out of what was available to us. So, as my closing words, I just say to you, make the art you want to see, make the music you want to hear, demand your right to make the communities that will enable you to create what you were put here to create. Idolize your friends and make them idolize you back. Treat your work and your peers' work as if it's the most important thing in the world, because it probably is. And enact mass mutiny against gender norms. That's it. Thank you.